Hi, my name is Tracy Townsend, and I teach English, most particularly foundations of British literature, rhetoric and writing, speculative fiction, and creative writing at the Illinois Math and Science Academy. My side hustle is that I'm also a novelist. So this is probably a bit of a cheat of an answer, but I don't care. Because I'm answering with a series, and the series in particular that I would name as my favorite is Roger Zelazny's The Chronicles of Amber. It's a 10-book sequence. He began publishing it in the late 1960s and carried through until the early 1990s. And continued to write short stories attached to that universe right up until his death in 95. And what I love about the 10 Zelazny novels that are the Chronicles of Amber is there's this enormous cast of crazily Machiavellian, brutally self-interested brothers and sisters. Unsurprisingly, Zelazny was a friend of George R. R. Martin, and Martin has said in interviews before that he views Zelazny as just having kind of paved the road for him to Game of Thrones with what he did in The Chronicles of Amber. But all of these characters, unlike in Martin's work where we keep switching to different close third-person points of view, the first 5 books in the series are first-person point of view from a character named Corwin. The second 5 books, first-person point of view from a different character named Merlin. And so you're always in this one person's head, seeing things through his very particular biased frame. They're both deeply unreliable narrators with agendas of their own. But the cool thing about the series is that it rereads so well. I mean, there's some books that I've loved and I've gone back to, and I felt like that was fun, but I felt like most of the fun was spent on the first go. What's cool about Zelazny's series, every time I revisit it, which I've done many times over the last 20-odd years or so, every time I reread it, I notice something I didn't see before. Whether it's the way certain characters, like a tone within characters' interaction that gives room for a slightly different interpretation of that guy's motive over there, or a realization that something that occurs 4 books later is actually seated here in this moment, and you have that sort of kind of face-slapping, oh my god, you did the thing moment, that can make you really sort of admire an author, and also sort of semi-hate them, slightly hating as well. And so I love the fact that there's so much going on in these 10 books that reward your time every time you go back to them, and that you can kind of re-envision the way the story would be told if you were in someone else's very biased head. So I love all kinds of entertainment media. I'm a little bit of sort of like an entertainment omnivore as far as that goes. One of my least favorite things is people being snobbish about certain types of entertainment being superior or inferior to others. That said, this comes with the caveat that I'm pretty games literate, which is something that people seem to notice about me in conversation, which is weird for the fact that I play 0 games. I watch people play games the way sane people watch other people watch like television or movies and stuff. And so with that in mind, that gives me this perspective on games which is really different from an actual gamer. So that's just sort of a caveat for the total answer here. I think that each different genre of storytelling has certain strengths and weaknesses. There are certain types of stories that could be told in this media, in this media, and this media. Certainly we see it when there's a major novel that comes out that gets a lot of traction, and then there's the immediate lunge towards turning it into a film or a television series or what have you. And then there's that frustrated response you get sometimes from fans of the original, whatever it was, who say, it isn't the way I saw it in my head, or they skipped this bit, or why, or they're doing it wrong. The fact of the matter is, all of these media tell really interesting, engrossing narratives. But they're narratives that have totally different relationships to their audiences. You know, the act of reading is an act of creating the sort of cinematography within your mind. And some authors are really painstaking in describing things to you because they have a very specific cinematic image. And others are a little bit more open. They care much less about what you're seeing and what things look like. Like in the SF world, a great contrast between those two things. Like Vonnegut. Vonnegut doesn't belabor descriptions of things, generally. He wants you to get inside the experience the characters are having, and their absurdities and their conundrums and whatnot, but he's not going to spend a great deal of time making sure that you know, like, where is all the furniture in a room. Whereas a very different type of approach to things, really more Baroque, might be Clarke, Arthur C. Clarke was way more interested in like how are things physically laid out, and what do landscapes look like, and what do space stations look like, because he liked the practical nuts and bolts of that, because if you don't know where the air hatch is, then you don't know other stuff too. And even that's different from like N.K. Jemisin, who, is equally invested in getting inside of characters' heads and also inside of the landscape, because usually whatever shit is happening in the world has significant bearing on what's happening in the characters' lives. But when you make those adaptations, it's not so much, I think, that people should be crying out and saying they're doing it wrong. It's that you have to do it differently. You can do overhead narration to account for what's going on in characters' minds and their experience and whatnot, but it just sounds awkward in film. Film doesn't do a whole lot of overhead narration because it comes off a little bit like old 50s noir, detective pieces and stuff, that it's just not really a thing we do anymore. Last night, actually, in those hours where you're not quite ready to go to bed yet, but you're not authentically tired, we were channel cruising back in Shea Townsend, and Mr. Townsend landed on the last 30 minutes or so of the Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince film. And I was watching it, and I realized that it is a phenomenally boring film. It's just deeply boring, and it's deeply boring because it's trying to beat by beat do what the chapters of the book itself did, except you don't have the benefit of the interior life of Harry processing stuff. You're just seeing like Daniel Radcliffe standing there staring at a wall for a bit and looking thoughtful. And so I think you have to be really thoughtful as a creator about what is your genre equipped to do really well. If you're writing a game and you want it to be a sandbox kind of environment, then that's a completely different sort of experience you're offering than if you've got something that's a little bit more on rails, something that's more of you have a story to tell and it has to have these points hit in this order along the way, as opposed to there's a network of experiences your character has that exist within a sort of larger frame. And all that's different from, say, a comic book, or even, a serial television show. It has completely different sort of beats in terms of drama than a film does, and what it has to do to get you engaged and to satisfy you happens at a different pace and in a different sort of way, both within the series as a whole. If you're the sort of Netflix binger, you've had that feeling of like an individual episode will take you up and down that sort of curve of drama, but if you were to map those episodes against the arc of the series itself for that particular season, you should see that same up and down. And so it has to exist both as almost like a chapter and as a whole. And so I think the problem becomes not which is the superior form of storytelling, but has the storyteller chosen the best format for what they want to create? So again, in that sort of frame of I'm a multimedia experiencer of entertainment. For a really long time, my husband and I have had a group of friends who come over to our house really regularly. At the height of our busyness with them as a friend group, they would come over as many as 2 or 3 times in a week. But generally, they're over every weekend for sure. And it's been a slightly rotational membership as people have gotten different jobs and moved out of state or gotten married or whatnot. And we lovingly refer to them as the hobos. And the hobos' uniting factor is that they are all geeks of various types and misfits of various types who end up at our house wanting to play games and hang out with people who speak geek. Some of them are folks who have wives who are not geek adjacent. Some of them are just sort of like lifelong bachelors. But they've had different memberships and things. And so one of the great things about having this sort of like geek population that sort of lives in my house kind of in the same way that in the old Seinfeld episodes you would see like Kramer just walk into Jerry's place like he owns it. It's sort of like that. So my kids have grown up under the belief that they have a huge population of uncles. We differentiate between the blood uncles and the hobo uncles by calling the hobo uncles the evil uncles, and then all other uncles are just uncles. And so they're pretty sure they have a really giant family that just hangs around their house all the time. There have been a few times I've come home from work and they're already there. Like my husband isn't even there. They've just let themselves in and they're on my couch. And it's this sort of, it's kind of this fun culture of found family that very much sort of defines what my life is outside of my work when I'm here. So anyway, they come at all hours, and they stay at all hours. And on more than a few occasions, a part of the draw that brings them back is I always cook. And my husband seems to think I'm very good at it. I think mostly I just keep people fed. But in any case, there's always dinner in the bargain, and then sometimes people just fall asleep in somewhat random locations, and I find them in the morning, and they need food. And so then the short order cook is just a reference to, like at the Greasy Spoon, somebody where you just walk up to the counter and you tell them a thing you want to eat, and they make it. And so I have, for many years of my marriage now, been a short order cook for houses full of tired gamers. Sometimes I go to sleep after staying up late and doing my own writing and things like that, and it's like 1 a.m, and I come downstairs to say goodbye to the hobos, and some number of them will be there in the morning when I get up, and I will just sort of poke them and ask them what they want to eat, and I make it happen. So there we go. That's a day in the life of Townsend.